Hello, I'm Sumey Ceylan, and you're watching Playback, Tier 2 World's weekly showcase of our best stories from around the globe. Coming up, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan once again makes a push for peace as he meets with Russia's Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of a summit in Kazakhstan. We look at the historic agreement between Lebanon and Israel to end a 12-year-long maritime border dispute. What does it mean for the two countries? And we look at Europe's scramble to deal with the looming winter energy crisis amid Russia's ongoing attacks against Ukraine. The Turkish president has used a meeting of Asian leaders to again stress the need for peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Vladimir Putin met on the sidelines of a summit in Kazakhstan, where grain diplomacy, energy security, and the ongoing conflict were all on the agenda. Tier 2 World's Melinda Nusifora reports from Astana.
As Russia finds itself increasingly isolated on the world stage, Turkey has again extended the hand of cooperation. Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Vladimir Putin met on Thursday against the backdrop of an Asian leaders summit in Kazakhstan. In front of the cameras, the pair highlighted their ongoing support for the Black Sea grain corridor and energy security.
We are supplying gas to Europe via Turkey. Turkey proves to be the most reliable route for gas supply to Europe. Thanks to your stance, Mr. President.
But behind closed doors, it's expected the leaders once again discussed the conflict in Ukraine. They've met multiple times in recent months on the issue.
I have always said that a just peace can be achieved through diplomacy. War has no winners, and peace has no losers. The intensive efforts we have carried out with the UN and the parties to eliminate the negative effects of the war have gained the appreciation of the whole world.
The Turkish president made the comments during his opening address to the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia, also known as CICA. Vladimir Putin didn't mention Ukraine directly in his speech, but he did allude to changes in the global power dynamic.
Today's meeting takes place against a backdrop of major changes in global politics and economics. The world is becoming truly multipolar, with Asia playing a prominent, if not key, role as new centers of power emerge.
CICA is a collective of 27 Asian countries, comprising more than half the global population and GDP. Here in Astana, CICA was officially elevated from an intergovernmental conference to a fully fledged international organisation. And that means it now has a greater voice on the world stage.
21 of the 30 largest cities worldwide are in Asia. The future of Asia itself will depend on our collective readiness to strengthen dialogue among our cultures, traditions, and worldviews.
Lofty ambitions in troubled global times. Melinda Nusifora, TRT World, Astana, Kazakhstan.
Israel and Lebanon have finally reached an historic agreement to end a long-running maritime dispute in the Mediterranean Sea. The deal, brokered by the U.S., is the first to be reached between the countries, which are technically still at war. It paves the way for new oil and gas exploration. It's a huge boost for Lebanon as it struggles against an economic and energy crisis. Kübra Akkoç explains.
The land border between Israel and Lebanon is known as the Blue Line. It was drawn by the UN in 2000 after Israel withdrew from South Lebanon. The UN patrols the border, parts of which are still disputed. The maritime border dispute is somewhat connected to the land border dispute because both countries take the same land-based point of origin to define their exclusive economic zones in the sea. The result is a triangular-shaped disputed area in the Mediterranean Sea of some 860 square kilometers, estimated to be rich in natural gas fields and oil reserves. The agreement is expected to boost natural gas production. Lebanon is mired in a deep economic crisis. It hopes access to the Kana gas field could provide it with billions of dollars of income. The agreement enables Israeli production of natural gas from the Karish maritime reservoir, welcome news for its Western allies who are looking for alternatives to Russian energy. Kübra Akkoç, TRT World.
The Russian-installed leader of Ukraine's southern Kherson region is calling on civilians there to leave as Ukraine's counteroffensive gains more ground in the occupied territory. Meanwhile, Kiev has stepped up its pleas for more air defense weaponry after the Kremlin ordered a wave of aerial attacks. Moscow's deadly strikes on civilians hit the Ukrainian capital, along with residential buildings in the southern city of Mykolaiv. Rahul Krishnan reports from the ground.
Civilians lived in this building in Mykolaiv. Many of them remained trapped under the rubble after it was hit by Russian shelling early on Thursday. Rescuers pulled out this 11-year-old from the debris of his home. Kiev says this is deliberate terrorism by Moscow. A residential building was also hit in Belgorod, a southwestern Russian city bordering Ukraine. This resident describes hearing 2 explosions. Moscow blames Kiev for this attack. Kiev denies it. But as its troops push on east, more testimonies emerge of how devastating this war has been on civilians. This is what's left of Kherson.
There's no house which was not damaged by the Russians. Everything there, everything. It was a disaster, a complete disaster. There was not a single peaceful day. We were hiding in the shelter and planting in the garden when there was no shelling.
Russia says Kherson and 3 other Ukrainian regions are theirs. Much of the world formally refused to recognize the illegal annexations at the United Nations this week. But Kiev has the momentum on the front lines, and the Kremlin-installed leader of Kherson urged residents to evacuate.
The Kherson administration has decided to organize opportunities for Kherson families to travel to other regions of Russia for leisure and study. I am addressing the leadership of the country. I would like to ask for your help in organizing such process.
But yet, nowhere feels safe in Ukraine. Iranian-made kamikaze drones targeted critical infrastructure outside of the Ukrainian capital on Thursday. The Ukrainian president reminded the West that they only have 10% of the air defenses they need. And the head of the IAEA says a safe zone around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is needed now more than ever.
It is, of course, counterintuitive to talk about protecting something which is being shelled and take weeks and months to get to protect it.
As Western nations pledge their growing support to Ukraine and diplomatically snare their teeth at Russia, neither side seem willing to back down in this war. And with it, the prospects of a resolution seem more and more distant. Rahul Radhakrishnan, TRT World, Kiev, Ukraine.
The fighting in Ukraine has prompted NATO to strengthen defense on its own borders, with allied forces carrying out war games in Estonia. Around 2,000 soldiers are taking part in Exercise Bold Huzza, a training operation where lessons learned from the Ukrainian battlefield are being put into practice. Our correspondent Sarah Morris has been embedded with the troops.
In the Estonian forest, just 100 kilometres from the Russian border, British, French, Danish and Estonian troops are simulating an enemy invasion. These may be war games, but Estonia's proximity to Russia is a powerful reminder of the danger on its doorstep. These soldiers are part of NATO's enhanced forward presence, 4 multinational combat-ready battle groups deployed across Poland and the Baltic countries in response to the growing threat from Moscow. These exercises are designed to teach the foreign soldiers how to fight on Estonian terrain.
It's not quite as rolling as we're used to in the UK. Everything is lower. I think the highest point in Estonia is just over 300 metres. So when it comes to operating in armour, it's become slightly trickier to conceal armoured vehicles in low ground. So trying to work instead with the natural environment we have, so wood blocks, etc., is providing us a really interesting training opportunity.
Lessons learned from the battlefield are being drawn on here. Russia's use of tanks in Ukraine has highlighted that heavy armour, once considered outdated, still has a role on the front line. Estonian Major Dmitry Kondratenko admits watching columns of tanks being destroyed in the war has sparked a rethink on how to fight.
Before, the intention was more concentrated on the maneuver. However, if you will be destroyed on your assembly area before the maneuver, so the maneuver will not gonna happen.
Concealed by the overcast weather, fighter jets, helicopters and drones are supporting these ground troops. Infantry are also practising firing Javelin anti-tank missile systems. Of course, this is an opportunity for troops from different countries to practice working together, but these exercises also serve another purpose. If not a warning, then at least a reminder of what Putin's forces could face if he sends them across the border. Moscow says it invaded Ukraine to halt NATO expansion, but nearly 8 months into the conflict, these war games are yet another example that the alliance has never had a stronger presence on Russia's border. Sarah Morris, TRT World, Tapa, Estonia.
While Britain is one of the main countries helping to build up Ukraine's defenses against Russia's assaults, the UK said it would provide, for the first time, rockets capable of shooting down cruise missiles. The announcement comes after Germany said it would supply the first of 4 air defense systems to Ukraine. TRT World's Andy Rosejan has more.
At a NATO meeting in Brussels, Ukraine's allies announced delivery of new air defense systems. Britain announced it would be sending, within weeks, rockets that can shoot down the kind of missiles that Russia has been using to pound civilian and infrastructure sites in Ukraine over the last few days. And Germany said it was speeding up delivery of 4 air defense systems that it had promised Ukraine months ago. The first of those systems, Germany says, will arrive in days.
The more audacious and cruel Russian terror becomes, the more obvious it is to the world that helping Ukraine protect the skies is one of the most important humanitarian tasks for Europe.
Meanwhile, after a meeting of European Union energy commissioners in Prague on Wednesday, they tried to emphasize the positive.
We have reached out to reliable gas suppliers so that so far all the volumes that Russia has cut, we have been able to replace via alternative supplies.
The 27 nations of the EU have also agreed to cut demand preemptively to avoid possible gas rationing and power outages down the road. And they hope that by next week, they will come to agreement on a price cap on oil. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow had nothing to do with the high energy prices across Europe.
We're ready to buy European goods, but they don't sell them to us. They imposed embargoes on several commodity groups, hence the deficit. What does Russia have to do with it? Again, they'll blame everything on us. We sell what they want. Please, buy it at market prices.
Adding to the energy pressures, a leak has sprung in the Druzhba gas pipeline in Poland. It's one of the largest suppliers of oil from Russia to Central Europe. Poland said the leak was likely accidental. And Putin finds himself again under pressure from the United Nations. The UN on Wednesday approved a resolution 143-5 to condemn Russia's annexation of parts of Ukraine.
Today it's Russia invading Ukraine, but tomorrow it could be another nation whose territory is violated. It could be you. You could be next.
Not surprisingly, Russia voted no, and so far, Putin has not taken to heart any condemnation from the UN. Andy Rosejan, TRT World, Washington.
The war in Ukraine was also in the spotlight at the 4th Turkish-German Energy Forum in Berlin. It's a key platform for the two countries to discuss their transition towards net zero emissions. Germany is urgently trying to accelerate its share of renewables to make up for lost gas flows from Russia. And as Sibel Karkuş reports, Turkey may be key to solving that problem.
Turkey and Germany are partnering up. They want to accelerate their transition to renewable energies through closer cooperation, this time in the field of green hydrogen power.
Turkey's high renewable potential, its low construction cost for renewable energy plants, and the improvement of existing pipelines makes it one of the best fits for Europe's green hydrogen production and trade.
Green hydrogen, the EU says, will be a key element in the economy of the future and help decarbonize various sectors such as aviation. But Germany can only cover around 30% of its demand for green hydrogen. That's why it's now turning to Turkey, which Ankara says will be able to export 2 million tons by 2050. Analysts say there's lots of potential in many other fields too.
Turkey is a very good country for renewable energies, wind, but in particular also solar. And so I see a lot of opportunities for deepening the collaboration in technology transfer, but also in energy partnerships. And I think Turkey, being a neighbor to Europe, is a very natural partner for this.
Turkey ranks first in Europe in solar panel production and fourth in wind installations. This makes it a top supplier of much-needed panels and wind turbines for Germany, which is trying to diversify its energy sources. Transforming energy systems towards climate neutrality through close cooperation is the #1 goal of the Turkish-German Energy Forum. The war in Ukraine and the following energy crisis have only emphasized its importance, and Turkey says it's ready to continue to be a mediator in the field of energy too. Following Russia's attacks on Ukraine, European countries have been facing severe gas shortages. Turkey says it can play a critical role in delivering natural gas from neighboring countries to markets in the West.
There is the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan petrol pipeline, the Tanap gas pipeline, which is part of the southern gas corridor and goes through Turkey, carrying gas from Azerbaijan up to the Balkans and Italy.
Turkey has long been an important country in regards to Europe's geopolitical security. The government is ready to help provide energy security too. And officials say they are convinced tighter cooperation can be a win for both countries and the region as a whole. Sibel Karkush, TRT World, Berlin.
In Venezuela, hopes are fading of finding any survivors after a devastating landslide. Unusually heavy rains caused a major river to overflow in the town of Las Tejerias, 50 kilometers from the capital, Caracas. At least 100 people have died. Claire Harriet has more.
Firefighters in Venezuela carry the body of a woman from the river that swept her away during a seasonal storm on Saturday. Helicopters guide rescue teams from above, offering aerial support for colleagues on the ground. It's exhausting work, and they know this is a recovery, not a rescue operation. The town of Las Tejerias was devastated in what's become one of Venezuela's worst natural disasters since flash floods in 1999 killed 10,000 people.
My cousin was there in the corner when the river swept him away. He hasn't appeared yet. We haven't heard anything from him.
We're digging in my mum's house because in her last call she said she was drowning in the kitchen. But I haven't heard anything else. I've had a lot of help, but it's been 3 days and I'm feeling desperate.
I'm not from this neighborhood, but I came to help. Families who lost children are friends of mine.
President Nicolas Maduro visited the area on Tuesday and announced 3 days of national mourning.
We're facing an area of total catastrophe. It's a disaster zone. We haven't experienced a landslide of such magnitude in Venezuela for many years.
But this wasn't a freak act of nature. It's rainy season in Venezuela, and critics say better preparedness would have mitigated against heavier than average rainfall in the worst storm of the year. They blame the scale of the devastation on a combination of the climate crisis and government neglect of poor communities. Donations of shoes and clothes from across the country have begun arriving in Las Tejerias, distributed by volunteers. This is the latest crisis to hit Venezuela, which was once one of the richest nations in South America. A month's worth of rain fell in just 8 hours, and it'll take years for the community to recover. Claire Harriet, TRT World.
Nigeria has also been facing its worst flood in a decade. It has killed more than 500 people and displaced around 1.4 million more. A majority of those affected are farmers, and the government is warning that as the floodwaters expand, it will have a compounding impact on food security. Timothy Abuzu tells the story of a devastation from one of the most affected places in central Kogi State.
Communities and farmlands across Nigeria are underwater as the worst flooding in 10 years rages on. Water levels had been rising since July due to heavier than usual rainfalls and overflowing rivers, but they worsened in September after water was released from a dam in neighboring Cameroon. And the government has warned the situation will likely get worse in the coming days. After leaving from Okumi village, it took us 1 hour traveling by speedboat to find dry land and some occupants of the wrecked homes. One of them is 85-year-old Isa Abdullahi.
We have never seen this type of flood before. We are begging the government to help us and come to our aid.
The earliest people to arrive at this dry patch of land have been here for more than 1 month. They came with all they could save from their homes and fear it could take another 3 months before it's safe for them to return.
But life's basic needs like food and shelter are in short supply for hundreds of desperate families here. Rekia Yunusa says it's made it hard for her to care for her animals. She says they won't make it long without food.
No one envisaged this problem. Some of the pregnant goats died because of stress, even though these ones are hardly surviving.
So far, only a fifth of the people affected have received help. But this week, the government announced it would expand distribution of food and relief materials to the 31 states affected. But in another camp for displaced people in the state capital, they say the government's promise can't come soon enough.
This place is not comfortable. There is no mosquito net. The children are getting sick. One of my children is sick, and there is no money to take care of him. There's also not enough food.
In September, the United Nations named Nigeria among 18 countries on a hunger watch list. The situation is driven by conflict, extreme weathers, and soaring food prices aggravated by the pandemic and Russia's war in Ukraine. And authorities say the impact of the flooding could put millions of already food insecure people on the brink of hunger. Timothy Obiezu, TRT World, Kogi State, Nigeria.
In Thailand, funerals have taken place for the 36 children and teachers murdered at a daycare center. Ceremonies had to be split across 3 temples in the rural northeastern town, rocked by one of the worst mass killings in the country's history. Liz Maddock reports.
24 tiny coffins, each adorned with toys, food, and their favorite things for the children to carry into the afterlife. 4 days of formal Buddhist mourning are coming to an end. For the parents of those killed in Thailand's worst sole perpetrator massacre, there's a lifetime of grief and regret to come.
On the day of the incident, I didn't speak to him. I normally do every morning before I leave for work, but it was raining that day and I was in a hurry. I didn't get to say a word to him on the day he died.
The rural town of about 6,000 people has come together. Almost every household has taken the time to kneel in front of each of the 36 victims' portraits and say goodbye. Some helped build additional funeral pyres so there wouldn't be long waits. Others even arranged for children to wear costumes, signifying their unfulfilled dreams.
The more we spoke to relatives, we realized these children had dreams to become doctors, soldiers, astronauts, and police officers. So we provided those uniforms for them to wear.
The body of the gunman was cremated in a town about 90 minutes away, as no local temple was willing to carry out the former police officer's last rites. The country is asking questions about its high rates of gun ownership, homicides, and drug use. Here, the focus has been on keeping the spirits happy, essential in their beliefs for them to live well in the afterlife. Liz Maddock, TRT World.
And finally, in Yemen, more than 2 million living in the southern city of Taiz are struggling to get clean water. Houthi rebels control key water resources there. Sena Saylan has the story.
Marwan Hassan leaves his house every day searching for water from public tanks to meet his family's needs, even if it's only a small amount. But most of the time, he comes back with not a drop.
Sometimes we have to travel very far to bring back water because the tanks here are usually empty, and even far away we might not find any. Then we come back and buy water from the shop, and 20 liters of water is $1.50. It's too much, but we don't have any other option.
The shortage of water in Taiz has prompted many citizens like Marwan to search for other sources of the precious commodity.
Water prices increased because of the increase in prices of oil derivatives and the drying up of wells in the city. So we have to go and bring water from other cities, from locations that are very far.
Taiz is the third largest city in Yemen in terms of population, and its residents are struggling with 8 years of conflict. Houthis cut off the lines of water supply in the eastern areas of the city, which includes nearly 80% of the city's wells. Although the authorities in Taiz have taken some emergency measures, people believe that they are not enough to ward off a looming catastrophe.
People mostly have to depend on the wells in the city, but they have a very limited efficiency, and the water we have is from a very limited area. So we have to collect water from the wells in this area and distribute it to the people.
With water scarcity an escalating problem, there are fears people will be forced to turn to contaminated water, increasing the risk of cholera, typhoid, and other diseases. Sena Saylan, TRT World.
Well, that rounds up your week of news here on Playback. Stay tuned to TRT World for the latest stories.